Great. So we'll get started with our panelist introductions, and Julie, you can kick it off.
Next. Hi, I am an architect and have been in practice for over 30 years. I now own my own company with my husband, Smith-Clementi Architects, and I too love CA. It's been a couple of years since I've actually been at that end. The last few years have been all about planning and preparing. So I have lots of memories of projects over the years.
Awesome. Susan, would you like to go next?
Hi, everyone. My name's Susan Wampa Gillespie. I'm principal of a firm called Wampa Design. We're a small firm. We do architecture interiors, primarily single-family residential, and also some commercial projects as well. I also love CA. I've been, I don't know, it's been almost 20 years now, and I've had my business for about 5 years, and we're super busy. We have I would say 20, 25 projects, and then we're in construction on like 8 or 9. So we're like solidly in CA right now. So it's like a
wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Your mind isn't racing at all. Stephanie, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Stephanie Lynn. I'm a landscape designer. And recently started a company called Necta Landscape Design with my partner Neve. So it's just a 2-person small firm. We work on relatively small scale, intimate residential projects. And so maybe my background is going to be a little bit different in the kind of landscape design context. I've worked a little bit in the past with commercial, civic, and international projects as well, but definitely I would say emerging and learning a lot and have a lot to learn.
Great. And Charlotte, you're next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Charlotte Hutton. I am an architect. I've been licensed since 2018, and I have about 10 years of CA experience here and there, off and on. My first job out of school was working for a developer, so I got my feet wet really young, and now in architecture I get to do CA off and on, but I really like it.
Awesome. So we're gonna start tonight by just spinning through a pretty short deck. We have some slides prepared and just touch on some like broad concepts, and then we're gonna move to asking the panelists some questions. And then when we have about 10 minutes left tonight, we'll end with some Q&A from the audience. So we just dive in and we'll get going with this little slideshow, I think.
There. So I'll start the first slide. And seeing as I've been in this business for a while and understood what it's like to be the only woman on a job site, that Rani put together these statistics of where we're at now. And it's like, oh boy. Okay, so the females represent 17% of licensed architects, and that is just still way too low. As of 2017, only 29% of architecture firm leaders were female. I actually thought that was high, but great. We need more. Females represent only 9% of workers in construction per recent OSHA statistics. Yeah, I mean, just think about the last time you were on a job site, and how many women did you see on a construction site? One of the last sites I was on, there was a woman iron worker, and we all just stopped and we were like, wow, this is great. But she was the only one. When you combine architecture and construction, these stats become palpable. Women are typically minorities on a job site, which can lead to stress. And I think that even Rani brought up that women of color have an even smaller representation on a job site, and that can, be even harder. So, I think looking at how, just to say, during this process, it's about CA and how we can deal with it. But at the end of the day, we need to just always bring more people into the fold here, and more women. Anytime you can advocate for women in construction at all levels, development through, engineering, architecture, landscape, and on the site, we should all try that as much as possible.
For sure.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about confidence, and basically you need to know that when you are on the site, you are there because you're valuable. And so what sort of value do you bring to the project, especially if you're new and you're entering the profession? It can be everything from technical knowledge, familiarity with the project, disposition. I think that one is sometimes undervalued. Communication skills, or all of these combined. I know for me, when I was starting out, it was just being the person who took all the notes on the project. And then I got more confident. And then I was the person who knew the project. And then I was the person who answered the questions of the project. So it's really about kind of, putting yourself out there, going with confidence and knowing that you're there because you're supposed to be. Yeah, so owning your strengths, it's going to change your body language and demeanor. The more confident you can be, the more people are going to question whether you should be there and know that you should. And then becoming comfortable asking questions. Everyone deserves to understand what's happening. And if something feels confusing, it's okay to speak up. That took me a while to learn. And once you get into that habit of asking questions, it becomes a lot easier, and you never look foolish. You look like someone who wants to learn, and you look like someone who's confident enough to ask questions. So don't be scared of that.
So I'm going to talk about kind of building off of that confidence. It's like being comfortable and being safe on the job site. So like dressing the part, dressing to feel safe. So a lot of times it's required to wear closed-toed shoes, hard hat, brightly colored vest, and safety goggles. Just usually a requirement to like enter the gate. And then dress to feel comfortable. So a lot of times things are like really messy, and you just want to be able to be comfortable moving around, getting into tight spots, and wearing clothes that are going to be like durable and that you're not going to worry about. And this last point that Rani prepared actually is like big one, is like having your hands free and being able to kind of point at things and take notes, and then like take pictures and basically document while you go. So having pockets, like I never have enough pockets. So if anyone has a recommendation on like the best CA pocket outfit, it really helps just to be able to communicate, to have all these things on hand. So like your phone or a tablet, measuring tape, pen and paper, laser pointer, whatever it is, and just to have your hands free most of the time, even with all that stuff.
Sorry. So basically your role on site is, it says the architect's role is to observe construction for conformance with the construction documents. So, I'm not exactly sure how familiar you are, but that means like you are there to make sure your design intent has been translated properly. You're not necessarily there to kind of like check that the contractor is doing certain things correctly. And actually at a certain point, once you kind of go through the licensing process, you're supposed to kind of like stop at a certain point just for liability reasons. And so basically you're there to kind of like, check that the design is getting built properly. Once you're there, look around, take notes, report the progress. Stephanie, I actually got a phone case that has a strap. So I got it once I had a baby, but it's great because I was constantly losing my phone on the site. So it was like pretty helpful to kind of have your hands free. This is a good one. Don't feel pressured to give an official response to the question. You can simply say that you need to review the drawings and consult with your team before responding. And this really depends on the size of the project and your role. Are you, there to observe? Are you there to kind of give the answers, and you know, because sometimes you'll get called to prepare. Sorry, my 3-year-old's there to talk about a specific issue, and then in that case, you kind of need to review the drawings beforehand and kind of like be prepared to work things out. But again, you don't have to do that. You can request questions to be sent as RFIs. This is also great because, you know, often you'll want to check any changes with the client, which is super important. You don't want to necessarily give answers without an official approval, because they will look to you as an approval. And if that's not the approval, that means that's money, that things have to be changed. So generally when things get changed, that means money. And then like, do ask questions. I think that's a good one. You know, I feel like as architects, and designers, we're not necessarily expected to be, we are expected to be experts in some way, but it's not realistic for us to know everything. And so what I think is that we're most effective when we know how to find the answer. So it's okay when you don't know it and you can just say, hey, I need to check into that. But ultimately, I think construction is really a lot about managing personalities and creating workable solutions. And so, you know, my approach is basically, there's always going to be issues. Like there's always going to be problems, because that's just the nature of construction. You can't figure out everything in advance as hard as you try. So if you approach with everything from the like, we're a team and how are we going to work it out, you can create an atmosphere that allows problem solving rather than finger pointing, because that's really, I think, when it becomes contentious, and that's the most, you know, dangerous position for you legally. It's also like you need that contractor to finish, and then they need you as well. So if you kind of create this like atmosphere of like we're all working toward the same thing together and this needs to get done, it can be a much more positive experience. And then, you know, also too, like just if you make it about the issue and about the work, you're not really focused on, do I belong here or whatever. That shouldn't even be a question. You know, it should just be like, I'm here to do something. And that can kind of take away, you know, that could take away any sort of like nervousness if you know, you're feeling that as well.
Those are really good points and kind of tie into some of these points. So this is really about creating the culture you want. And I think that, you know, anytime that you're maybe in the minority, and in this case, many times females are, I think that it's important to try and sort of build the type of environment that you wish was there. I know that sometimes that's, you know, easy to say and difficult to execute, but I think that some of these points, you know, can help get you there. And this first one is really kind of a no-brainer, but I think this is really about, you know, nobody on the job site is like better than anyone else. You know, contractors know how to do things we may not know how to do, and we know how to do things they may not know how to do. So I think just mutual respect of the contractors and all of the workers on site is really key. And then also touching on what Susan was just saying, if something goes wrong, and something will always go wrong, this is just like something I think, you know, you need to learn to roll with a little bit. I think it's very tempting to point a finger at that point. But if you can resist that urge and try to stay calm and really just stick to the problem itself and not how that problem got created, that's a huge help for setting the right tone, I think, on the job site. And it really ties into this third point, which is that sometimes you might make a mistake. And that's also okay. I think that it can, you know, I think architects are probably in that group of people that are hard on themselves, designers and architects. But again, like hopefully you didn't point a finger the first time around and then, you know, that extended to you. So again, just it's about calmly addressing the issue, not making it more than it already is, and just sticking to the actual facts at hand. Again, about the question. So this, I think, you know, creating an atmosphere where people are allowed to ask questions and they're welcomed it goes both ways. So I think as architects, you know, we should be able to ask questions, but I have noticed sometimes on site that I might be speaking in such a way that a contractor doesn't know what I'm talking about because I'm using terminology that is, you know, architecture school terminology, and they're just staring at me blankly. So I think that, you know, being aware of like, are people receiving the information that you're providing, and you know, just doing your best to try to create an environment of clarity, because really at the end, like clarity is everything, and sort of everyone being on the same page is really important. So I think whether you are doing the asking or the responding, just treating questions with care. And then this last one, you know, I think I'm guessing that part of the reason that so many of us love CA is because it's just a really cool process of being able to watch your ideas literally like come to life. It's so fascinating. I feel like you learn so much. And I think that appreciating everyone's contribution really creates a sense of like camaraderie and trust, and you know, just makes it fun to go on site and be observing what's going on. So I think just enjoying yourself, enjoying the process, because it can be stressful and it can be fast paced, but, you know, getting to see something that you may have spent a long time designing and planning and permitting and all that stuff, when it finally is real, that is pretty awesome. So I think enjoying that process is really kind of cool.
If I could just add to that, Rani, to say that
Sure.
being appreciative and thanking people for their hard work is definitely is a great thing. But I've also found that just acknowledging people, like when you come onto a job site, saying hello, and how are you, and acknowledging them as contributors. You know, I've seen architects just kind of slide right by people and not understand that even the person sweeping the floor is contributing. And so just really being open and acknowledging people and their presence on the job site, I've found has been just a way to get everybody, the mood can change if you're just cordial.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like building on that, like I've had experiences where, you know, there might be something that I'm kind of privately, you know, feeling really happy about, but I've like had the experience of witnessing someone else be proud of something, even though they're coming at it from a completely different angle. Like they're coming at it from like, I built this, and I'm coming at it from like, I drew this. And, you know, just like recognizing that there can be this like very shared sense of pride and appreciation, which is, it's definitely like compounds when it's shared. So this is our deck. Good luck, everyone. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now, but we are gonna kind of transition into some questions for the panelists, a little bit more of a storytelling part of the conversation. So I wanted to start, and we'll kind of just go one by one. There's no particular order here, but I wanted to ask the panelists to share like an example of a particularly challenging CA experience, and like maybe identify what made it challenging, what you tried to do to solve it. So Julie, you're for some reason just staring at me right now. So
no, I just you know, when you asked me to join this, and you know, trying to remember all these things, it occurred to me that I went onto a job site once, and they were passing out hard hats, and one of them was pink.
Oh no.
And it was like, wow, who's that one for? You know, it's like, so how do you know, so like, okay, I was appreciative that someone had thought to celebrate, let's just be, you know, kind of positive about it, the fact that there was a woman on a job site. But at the same time, like, why would I want to walk around in a pink helmet? You know, and so it's just like this kind of, sometimes these things come at you and they throw you for a loop that you're just so not expecting. It's like, and I had to, instead of getting snarky and kind of like, what the hell, you know, it's like, okay, you were trying to do something nice. But here's the thing, you know, and I sort of had to kind of joke and say, okay, well, if you wear it first, then I'll wear it next time. You know, it's like, it's got to be something that, you know, we strip the gender identity away from this, and really we should all just have pink helmets, and then the blue ones can be
Here, here.
This kind of weird thing that I remembered coming at this is just like, just at the beginning, like you're not even on the job site yet. You're kind of getting like, we're gonna set you aside. So I don't know, that's just my little anecdote of how everything can be challenging, even when it isn't intended to be.
For sure.
I have like a similar.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like, yeah, that first step onto the job site. So I feel like I'm definitely new to the process. And so one of my projects a few months ago, I like pulled up in my car at a residential site to meet the GC. And like the first thing that the GC said to me, like through my window, was like, so what high school do you go to? Like they're sending us high school students now. And so I'm like, oh my God, like I already like don't feel like I'm supposed to, like, I already feel like an outsider. And then so he like actually asked how old I was. I was like, oh, I'm 34. How old are you? So it definitely got kind of awkward in the moment, and we kind of laughed, and like luckily the moment passed, and then we kind of just went straight to work. And so there is that kind of like just like opening the door even, and just like showing up and maybe getting something and trying to get past that.
Yikes. Yeah, comments are everywhere. Charlotte, would you like to go next?
I'm happy to. The story I thought of was such a disaster, though. I'm almost like, should I even share this? I don't want to turn anyone off. I took over a CA project towards the end from a friend of mine who went on maternity leave, and she really tried to set me up for success. But she told me kind of even before my first meeting, she said, this is going to be a really tough project. And you know, I didn't really understand why, because she had done this amazing documentation, and you know, the CA was already rolling, and it was really just about the last 6 months of construction, and it was a really tough crowd. The rep, the client rep, was very mean. He was very unnice, and I kept thinking I could break him if I'm just cheerful enough and outgoing enough. And you know, I really thought that I could win him over, and I couldn't. And unfortunately, like, the lesson I learned was sometimes you need backup, and you really just need someone on your team. So I talked to one of our principals, and I don't want to name names, but I said, hey, Mark's being terrible. And he said, yeah, he's always terrible. We're not going to work with him again. We feel like he's abusive to our architects, but I'll stay on a call with you when you have these OAC meetings. And so just having someone there to either talk to afterwards to say, okay, what advice can you give me for the next call? Or can you believe he said that? It was really helpful to just have someone kind of bear witness and respond in real time with good advice, and just have backup. You know, sometimes you really just need to ask for help. And I was really lucky where I worked at a firm where I received it.
Charlotte, I've had more problems with white male client reps than any contractor I've ever dealt with.
Me too. Me too.
Contractors are easy sometimes compared to
the client is going to be on your team, but no, the contractor was on my team, and the client was the one who really just did not think that we were doing a good job, I guess. Or it was bad. It was so bad. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Good for you for asking for backup.
Yeah, I think that was a really good.
Oh, good. I was like, I hope this is a good. Like, I hope I'm a feminist. I really needed someone else on the call with me.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally understandable.
So asking for help. It's okay.
Asking for help.
Yes.
And hoping that you're at a firm that recognizes when you need it, and they're going to give it to you.
Yeah. Susan, would you like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to start.
Where
I
to
mean,
start?
yeah. I mean, I feel like it really depends. I kind of just like, I think I'm always like a super minority. I mean, like, that's just the way it is. It's not even like, it's adorable. It's more surprising to other people than it is to me. So it's not, I feel like that doesn't really bother me. I think it really just, you have to like be good at reading people. And I do think like, maybe it's part of like our socialization as women that, we can kind of get a read on. I'm not like, I don't want to make profound generalizations like that, but like, I kind of use that to my advantage and just kind of like are able to assess like, sorry, we have to it's dinner time. Assess how, how to kind of approach a situation. And some people like, now that I have my own firm, like I'm in the position of recommending contractors. And so I kind of approach everything with like an open book. And then you use that experience as a learning experience. You kind of like try to figure out all the signs, from the beginning, like of trying to get to know somebody, onboard a contractor, or like help the client select. And then, I try to be open about like my process about thinking about it. And then, once you're in it, you just kind of like, I like that point about like, you're going to make mistakes and the contractors will make mistakes. So you try not to get into that blaming, but some people do. I found generally, I actually stopped doing super small projects, like which I started out my firm doing, because that's just kind of like what you do, because I found that like, those are the most misogynistic contractors. It's like this guy who does kitchen and baths, and he's just like, oh, like I'm the man, and like, but he can't like, read plans. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I kind of look at that and I say, okay, I notice there's a pattern here. We're going to move on, right? But then, just throughout different projects, like I think I've kind of started to gravitate toward more people that I work well with. And then it's really changed my experience. I have like a few great contracts. I work with a woman contractor a lot. She's like this Filipino woman. She does a great job. There's another Nigerian American contractor that I do a lot of work with. And I feel like, you can kind of like, there is a difference, it's like, there is a level of like, you don't have to be on your guard at all time, because like, I think, when you walk in, especially to like bigger projects or commercial projects where there's like a team of people and you are, maybe that only person there, you do, I think, inherently kind of get on your guard. But I also think that's natural, because I think that everybody there, whether you're a man or you're a woman, you're kind of assessing, you're kind of, trying to figure out like where you belong. And so I kind of like look at it as it's a universal trait, and then try to kind of like separate it from my personal experience, and then just kind of make the best of the situation, right? And so if you kind of like just treat every issue as kind of its own thing, I think it's a lot more manageable to deal with, right? So and then I've had contractors where I'm like, okay, you've crossed that threshold that like we're not going to work together again. And then other people, you work it out and it's fine, and so it's less about, am I a woman, and more about like, are you a reasonable person to work with?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's kind of, yeah. So there's lots of little stories, but I feel like fundamentally in the end, it's like, can we work it out and still like want to work together again? And if we can't, like, there's enough fish in the sea. There's lots of architects, lots of contractors, like you can kind of, figure it out for the next time. So
Yeah. I have a couple questions. Well, first of all, the female contractors, did you kind of seek them out intentionally? And
no, actually my client found, and it was 3 people bid out a project that was standard, and then she just seemed reasonable in terms of like, listening, being organized, and there's not that many. And we definitely had conflicts. Like, she's not perfect.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect too, but like, it's kind of just, seeing that like, is this the way we can work together, right? Like I think for me, I'm actually inherently conflict averse. And so construction was like very stressful in the beginning, and it still can be stressful because there's always conflict. And I think once I accepted that, like, 100% there's going to be conflict, and just kind of like to be ready for it. I think it kind of helped to manage, you know, the personalities, because honestly, I feel like, and actually my client said this to me recently, she's like, she's worked with several contractors, and she's like, honestly, I feel like sometimes construction is about helping grown men manage their emotions. You know what I mean? Because like contractors, they flip out, and it's like sometimes about nothing. And it's like, so it's always like, and I get it, because like, you know, they're liable on certain ways, you know, so if you try to look at it from their approach, and then also just be like, okay, calm down, like, let's move forward. A lot of it is really just like calming people down, to be honest, whether it's your client, but you have to, I think, learning to manage yourself and your emotions is really important, because it's so late, sorry, honey, because you're doing it for a lot of other people as well. So yeah, it's definitely, I feel like a sizable part of our role is like therapist, right? And like totally trying to be the one who can stay the calmest or something like that. Well, since you're already on and you're in a groove, maybe you can just share like a couple, I don't know, either a story or like traits of what makes it seem to go better. Like, when does CA feel a little bit less burdensome, or like more smooth and enjoyable?
I mean, I think from the very first meeting with a contractor, I try to like really communicate that like we're trying to all work toward the same solution of getting this thing built. You know, like, we're here, it's got to get built. Like, how it happens is really entirely up to us. And I try to communicate that I respect, you know, their expertise, and I'm a reasonable person, right? And so I think if you communicate that, like, I've recently started doing some projects in Joshua Tree, which is interesting because it's like a very closed culture. And so, you know, it's like they are very suspicious of outsiders. There's too many LA people moving out there. You know what I mean? Yeah. We had this client with this a potential contractor, and like he was super on edge. And then once I just started talking about, you know, respecting his like expertise, like you could literally see him relax, you know? And so I think if you just like show people that you respect them, and you're not trying to like, you know, be the boss, because some people do. Some people just come in and either like want to be the hero or like, you know, create conflict. But if you just try to like, you know, show them you're a reasonable person, I think like it can just create a better atmosphere. And then sometimes it's something you kind of also have to reiterate during every call, during every conflict, that kind of thing. So yeah, and then sometimes like you do have to like lay the sledgehammer down, like, but like I think if you save it for when it really matters, you know, you can't do it all the time, or no, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's kind of like yeah, it's a challenge, but it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's fun, but like that part of it, but you know, it's definitely effective, and it's like how you get things to the finish line. So
for sure. And I think going back to just like what you said earlier about like really needing to know how to read people, because if you need to, you know, if you're reading that particular contractor who kind of needed to be validated a little bit, and then once you did, and then just that feeling of like somebody becoming so much more at ease, you know, it's like kind of starts with your own awareness in the first place. Okay, we'll just zip back. What's that?
I said within reason, of course. And that's where at some point you have to say like, okay, this isn't like, you shouldn't like be putting yourself at, you know, right. It's still a professional interaction. Exactly.
And it's still a contract. So okay, we'll maybe zip backwards. Charlotte, I think you are next.
Mine is really basic. Have the drawings on site, have the bid set on site, have the RFIs on site. If you can, have your, you know, spec booklet on site. And if you can't have those physical things, have an iPad with them. It's such a basic thing, but it helps so much to be able to say, see, the detail is drawn, or we can confirm that right now based on the drawing set, based on the spec. I've had to pitch in last minute and go to sites before where I just don't have the drawing set, mostly because of COVID. You know, you're just going straight from home, and it goes so much smoother if you have the physical set when you go. That's my best advice for CA. Have the set on site.
Awesome. Right. Like, be prepared.
Be prepared. Low hanging fruit.
Stephanie.
This is kind of a basic one. It's just kind of meeting the contractor or collaborator, kind of how they like to communicate. So some contractors, like, they like to have a quick text, like they don't want to listen to a really long voicemail and have to email you back, or they don't even check their email for days on end. So just kind of tailoring and building that expectation and relationship on that particular communication style.
Yeah, that's funny you say that, because I think that's so true. Like, some contractors love texting, you know, some are like, pick up the phone and they're going to call you kind of people. And like, I feel like you can kind of figure it out quickly. And it's a great point. It's a great point. And Julie, we can, if you want to give some of your greatest hits.
Well, I do, you know, to piggyback on what Charlotte said, I think, you know, I'm a kind of person that I love CA because I love to solve problems. And so I always have to resist and say, okay, what do the drawings say? You know, how did we get to this problem? And so I do think that, you know, I expect them to have the drawings there. I don't expect that I should bring them, but at the same time, I think it's, you know, always pointing back to what was the intent, you know, and then trying to unravel, you know, how we got here and how we can solve the issue. And there was a woman in our office who was doing CA with me, and she was so great because she really knew all the AIA stuff, you know, that's means and methods, that's up to you, that's not up to us, and just had all the, you know, every time the question came up, it's like, well, this is, you know, and I was always like, oh man, I have to bone up on all that stuff, because it's, you know, it's been a while, but it's so useful to really understand what your role is, and to, you know, to not be afraid to say that this is the design intent and it's means and methods, it's how you want to do it, you know. And so I just really understanding the architect's role is just super important, and then not being like, oh, I can solve this problem, like to resist that temptation. That's what my biggest problem is wanting to just wing it. So.
I totally agree. I try to have like a hierarchy of like, okay, these are the things I care about. Everything else is negotiable, you know? So it's like, you don't have the energy to like fight for everything, right? So it's like, what are the things that are like deal breakers to the design intent, like non-negotiable, and then everything else, like you can be flexible on if you have to, like in terms of like maybe avoiding a change order or that kind of thing. So if you kind of like, that's, I guess, also showing that you're reasonable to, you know, the contractor as well. But again, it's really about the drawings when it comes down to it. So.
So I think this kind of ties to the next question that I wanted to ask, which was that, how have your experiences with CA, like what have you learned from CA that you were then able to apply to either drawings, documentation, project management, design for like future projects? So basically, like, what are takeaways from CA that you've been able to apply to other things?
I'll start. Just get the money in the drawings.
Exactly.
Get the money in there.
That's the perfect, that needs to be a tote bag.
It's like, you could have the detail worked out perfectly, but if you didn't get the money in there, it's just, you know, I'm even now, it's like, okay, how do you get the drawings to get the scope?
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's the sort of the most important thing. And if one of the details isn't worked out, you will work it out during CA, but you have to get the scope in there.
Right, or else it's like, surprise.
Yeah, well, that's what I wanted. Well, okay, but that's not how we read it. And so, and then, you know, the plausible deniability that they can come back at you with. And so change orders for me, I get very nervous about change orders. And it's like, okay, well, I'll dig in these drawings and I'll find some scope, and then maybe we'll horse trade some scope. But if it's not in there, you have no leverage. So sometimes add a little extra things that I'm, you know, to Susan's point, we could give up if we needed to get these other things done.
Totally, yeah, it's all about, it becomes about negotiation. Yeah.
Julie, I'm curious, like, do you have a system for sort of ensuring that you've captured all the scope? I mean, I know that, you know, we look at our drawings, we review them, sometimes someone else may review them, but I'm just kind of curious if you have any tips for that, because I feel like these are the things I think about at like 11:30 p.m. as I'm falling asleep, you know? And I hate that feeling, but I'm, yeah, just curious, like.
I guess my point is that I don't think you ever will have everything.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you think about them in bigger chunks, okay, this is the storefront system, or this is the ceiling system, or whatever the system is, the idea being that you want to make sure that that is covering enough scope. For instance, we have a lot of spandrel glass on the project we're working on right now. And so there's different ways to do that. And, you know, we might be okay with the cheapest way to do that, but we're detailing in the nicer way to do that. And if it becomes an issue, then we can, you know, it gives us a little bit of latitude to say, okay, well, we'll put that in these areas, but in these other areas, it's not quite as important. And we can pull back on that scope. And I don't mean it as a value engineering tactic or technique, like that is another thing, but just to you know, get enough detail in there from a large perspective that you can then go in during CA and say, okay, I want to do it this way or that way, and really I just don't believe you can get every detail drawn. And so I just try to make sure that there is enough room to maneuver once we're there.
Yeah.
And answering RFIs.
I think it's
no,
like,
I'm not Ronnie. I don't have any perfect answers to.
No, of course not. Of course not. I'm just like, I just ask because I'm like, what amazing tip does this person have?
No, but also I guess my point of view is I look at something and I go, oh, that, you know, and that's a little bit, it's just experience. Like there's not enough detail, there's not enough notes, there's not enough spec, there's not enough anything in here to get what we're going to want out of this. And I look at things a little more in buckets and holistically, as opposed to drilling down into each specific detail. It's just my nature.
Yeah. I'm actually going to read Carol's question out loud for a second. Do you find value in having pre-construction meetings to discuss big systems like that before it starts getting installed?
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a true believer in design build and working with a contractor as a partner and not as an adversary and not as in a bid environment. Is if I can ever push a client to get some, you know, get a contractor in early and do all those pre-con things. I think that is the smoothest way to run a project, because then they're with you. They're talking about the details. They're talking about the materials, and this is decisions that you come to together, not just this is what I want.
Agree.
Stephanie, let's I'll go to you next, and if you want to share, like, you know, how has CA kind of, like, what have you learned from CA and that you've been able to apply to other parts of practice?
Maybe being in a more like landscape condition where we're doing a little bit more design build. We definitely have the expectation, like whatever we put on paper in this drawing set to be bid, it's almost like everything's going to be a placeholder within a couple feet even, or, you know, like there's going to be tree roots, there's going to be some existing site condition or some access issue or some kind of material sourcing issue that's going to change everything a little bit and like throw it all for, you know, a loop. And so we kind of come up with questions. We do have these like pre-construction meetings for these small scales and like walk with the contractor through the site and just kind of get their feedback actually on the design first for these small scale type projects. And it kind of helps because then like we had the drawing set, but then we start to negotiate a little bit of things like what might change because the drawing set actually, like, I didn't know how to detail that thing, or there's actually a tree root and like you can't just cut it, it's going to kill everything. So stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we don't always really know like we don't know the cost of like certain decisions we're going to make, and a lot of it is like materials and details and that kind of stuff. And so, to have those conversations earlier really helps you, first of all, figure that out for yourself. And honestly, sometimes it depends on the contractor. Like sometimes like the contractor's like, oh, like I got a metal guy that like can do this really well and it's not that expensive. So, I don't think we can know all the costs like to the T, but if you can bring in a contractor that was willing to have that conversation, you have a much more focused project, and are more likely, to hit the budget and not have to kind of like have these difficult conversations later. So.
Charlotte, I'm gonna call on you next.
Okay, mine's pretty basic. Keep really good records. I had a project that went to litigation, and it came down to, when did we get submittals in? When were they sent back out? And since we weren't using something like Procore, everything really fell to us to prove that we had taken records of when we were answering RFIs, when we were answering submittals. I can't stress enough how important it is to stay up to date on your record keeping and just be really on top of it, because it can get ugly if you haven't been doing that the whole time.
I totally agree. Like, get everything in writing. Like, I hate when contractors text, because I'm like, I need an email and I need a record. Like, I don't want a text. I don't, especially important things, right? And so even if they have a text or a phone call, we'll follow up with an email. And a lot of it is really to just protect your, in case something goes wrong in the future, and so yeah, it's always like covering yourself a bit, especially once it's like your license, so that becomes really scary. So.
Yeah, I've definitely heard from the people who are sort of organizational nerds that they especially love CA because it is so much just tracking and like, also doing things sort of quickly and in a very organized way. I have to say, I don't love that particular part of CA. I really like the on-site stuff, but I have to just force myself because of really, it's like fear, right? Of like, oh man, if I don't record this one little thing, it's going to come back and bite me. But yeah, like staying on top of records is huge. And then Susan, I don't know, I can't remember. Did we hit, I think we didn't hit on your example of just, learning from CA and like your CA experience.
Yeah, I mean, part of it, so it's interesting because, like depending on the scale of projects and the pace, like, sometimes like, for example, our drawings go out really early and really fast. And so, we don't always have like interior elevations and some of the things where you get, when Julie was talking about getting the money in there. And so part of it is just, especially once you start working with the same contractors, knowing like what they need to get an accurate price, right? So like on, especially since we go down to the level of like interiors, and certain contractors are totally okay being flexible, and certain ones, I've had a contractor, like we send them the drawings and like months later, they swore they looked at it and then they like completely didn't. And then the money's not in there, even though we sent them the drawings, right? So I know like, okay, you start to evaluate, okay, like that contractor is 80% good, but they did screw us a little bit. So, next time we know for that one, like I had this conversation with my team, like we're not sending out anything that's like not 90% there to that specific contractor. Other contractors, we can put allowances or that's something as well. So, it's knowing that like we're all human and we do have to make choices, right? Of like, is this going to be fast or is it going to be perfect? And then, knowing like for me, I try to know the minimum of what to show, because like, that I think to your point, Rani, about speaking a different language between like, if you're drawing, some contractors don't read drawings very well, which is ironic, but like it can happen, right? And so you want to be super clear and you don't want things to be overly convoluted. So like knowing, like starting to strip back to like what communicates your intent in the most minimum way, I think for me is like try to become a little bit of an art, because then also too, like you're going to lose money if you're overdrawing, right? Like you can't draw every detail.
Totally. Yeah.
So it's like what details
like,
need to be drawn and what don't. So
yes.
that's kind of like constant learning process.
Yeah. And an
Yeah.
art really, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I'm going to actually kind of transition to questions because there's a good question that's come in right now from Rebecca. So this question isn't, I'm just reading this. This question is inspired by the fact that I'm guilty of over apologizing, which I know is common among women. I'm guilty of that too. How do you handle it when you make a mistake? Does anyone want to respond?
I do something a little unconventional and I like own it. You know, sometimes like I've had people just say like, oh, you never want to like admit you're making a mistake. You don't want people to sue you. I found out like people can be really reasonable and they get really pissed off when you don't take responsibility. And that's when things get like litigious, right? So, you know, you don't have to necessarily, there are a few mistakes that can potentially be expensive, but sometimes like just the fact that you acknowledged, you know, that a mistake was made, or even if you don't want to say mistake, say like something was unclear, or, you know, just like acknowledge that like things could have been done better, right? And so I think, and also too, when you start to go into like deep into like the contracts, like there are certain things mistakes you're responsible for, and certain things like, for example, like if it should have been in there from the beginning and it wasn't, but like there's like reasonable knowledge that it should have been in there, like you're not necessarily responsible for that. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's a gray area that like is a conversation, but I think owning up to it is helps you move forward.
Right.
But
and I think owning up
fun.
to it, it can be brief, right? Like you don't have to like go on and on about it. You can just, it can be a quick owning up and then just like getting right to the problem solving part.
100%. Yeah. It doesn't have to be like, I'm so sorry, I made a mistake. You could just be like, you know, this happened, like we should have been on it, you know, really sorry. And then we like fix it, you know? So,
yeah.
I agree with owning it, but I really like it when I know that I've made the mistake before I'm confronted with it, because I like to think about like, okay, you know, what is the tenor of my apology? Just saying you're sorry is not necessarily going to do it. I think you need to kind of offer something up sometimes with that. Okay, yes, we were wrong about this, but we're gonna, you know, this, and try to integrate the solution into your apology a little bit, as opposed to just saying I'm sorry, and no, you don't need to say it more than once. But you know, some explanation or some way forward out of it, or just to say I need your help. But I like to kind of think about it before, to strategize how I want that apology to be read, if at all possible. So you just,
I totally agree.
But I agree with you, Susan. Like if you're trying to hide it, someone's going to figure it out. Just don't do it.
But no, that's the 100. Like that's exactly the point. I think it's a fantastic point. Like I think even like to mistakes and also like problems, like, you know, a major problem, like I try not to present it to the client until we have a solution. So like, don't call somebody and like freak them out and just be like, oh, this didn't happen. Like, you know, give it a couple hours, figure out some solutions, and just say, we're working on it. These are the potential solutions. So if you're constantly like creating trust, right? So that type of way of handling it creates a lot more trust than, you know, just like dropping the ball and just like freaking everybody out, which sometimes contractors do, sometimes like architects can do. So I think it just helps, you know, have a way forward, like Julie said.
So I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. I just want to be mindful of the time. We've got a few minutes left. So if anyone has anything else they'd like to ask the panel, this is your time.